Hey everybody and welcome back to IgnisKit. Today we will go over the long-awaited deck building process and how many speedroids are enough speedroids. I thank you for clicking on the giant red thank you button down there, if you have, and without more delay, here is the subscribed and non-subscribed viewers list. Let's get the shorter one longer. As many speedroids as we can into a list, preparing to get into Dueling Book or any Yu-Gi-Oh! Sim of your choice, and get this deck building started. Cue the intro. If this is the first video of this series you watch, check out parts 1 and 2. They hold crucial info about why certain cards are and aren't run at multiple copies. Now, we start the usual speedroid list by adding 1 Teratop to search all of our other combo pieces, 3 Marble Machine to be a discount Teratop, 2 Ultra Hound as a Foolish Burial. I'll come back to these two in the final part of the series, because the ratios are, depending on the player, flipped. 3 Card Turbo as a free level 3 tuner, 3 Dekatomborg for dice access and other shenanigans, 2 Denden Daikadook for our extended plays, 1 Red-Eyed Dice because this is the most important piece in the basic combo, 1 Fukimadoshi Piper because why not, it's free card advantage, 1 double Yugioh, Monster Reborn, that's it. 1 Rubber Band Plane as our level 5 shuffle for Ultra Hound. 3 copies of Speedroid Wheel and Speed Recovery, more about these in just a second. And for finishing touches, a pair of Speedroid Duplicate. I realize that by now this sounds like a recipe, but I'll be damned if this won't make a great pile of toys. Before we talk about how many extenders there are and how they work, we will list the extra deck core and some other viable options. We're on the floor, 2 copies of Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon, Mecha Beast Auroradon, High Speedroid Kite Rake Hagoita, Chanbara, and ending with 2 copies of Cork Shooter and Rubber Band Shooter. These are the main extra deck monsters we play. Option wise, we have Maple Maiden, Clearing Synchro Dragon, Clearing Fast Dragon, WYNN Pexas Ignister, Virtual World Beasts Yugioh and Shen, Emancipator Riptide, High Speedroid Kendama, Stardust Judge Warrior, and several others. Obviously these aren't all of them, but the base rule is if it's WYNN and a Synchro monster we can run it, as long as it doesn't have any special requirements or tuners that it needs to for its summoning. For this list here we'll be using the following aside from the core extra deck monsters. Shen as a good going first walking dimensional fisher and recycling tool for banished monsters. WYNN Pegasus Ignister as a banished target for Rubber Band Shooter for a certain play involving Piper. 1 Charge Warrior for extra draw power. 1 yugioh as a walking wall and, be it costly, removal. Now, before we hop on the side deck, for the extenders as well as the spells and traps, I got a good friend of mine on to tell you all about it.
Hey, Gatsby here, and I've been specifically instructed not to talk about the extra deck. So today I'll be talking about extenders and a few tech cards instead. First, a disclaimer. I'm a Yugi boomer who hasn't played at a competitive level in a little over 10 years, and only recently picked up Speedroids after suffering playing Raid Raptors. So I'd advise you to take my limited scope of expertise with a grain of salt, similar to how I feel after ending a turn on a single normal summon of a Raid Raptor into an Ash Imperm Veiler. Starting with extenders, these are cards that are going to be a guaranteed free wind monster special summon. Sure, cards like Pank exist and are available at 1, but most of the time Speedroid players are looking for ways to not break the wind locks set by the other cards within this deck list, while also looking for a second wind monster for easier access into the Link 2 Rubber Band Shooter. If I was going to talk about every attribute Cyber Dragon, I'd be here all night, so to keep it simple, I'll only stick to a few wind monsters. Starting with our pseudo wind Sidros, we have Red-Haired Hasty Horse, Primitive Butterfly, and the newly added Wandering Griffin Rider. These are my usual go-tos, given that they're basically free. Cards like Primitive Butterfly and Wandering Griffin Rider only require that you have no monsters on board, while Horse requires a free column to special summon it, even if the board is already filled with monsters. Biggest difference here being that Horse and Butterfly are level 5, while Griffin Rider is a level 7. And if you know anything about this deck, then you know that the ability to count to 10 gets you into Baron faster than your opponent can ask how many summons that was. As an added bonus effect of Griffin Rider, you can potentially cause psychic damage to your opponent when it's the first card that you've played, making them think that you're rocking a Brave Engine. Other options like Ancient Warrior Loyal Guan Yun are a great going second option that can potentially get a free interaction with its pop effect, with the conditional effect of your opponent having more monsters than you. Both Dinotherium and the Tricky can be used as well, but Dinotherium runs the risk of your opponent getting a free monster, while the Tricky requires a discard, taking away from your already limited resources. COCKADOODLEDOO can throw a tuner on the board, but in a deck that usually has more tuners on board than they know what to do with, it's not as great in practice. Lastly, we also have the option to use Lightning and Tempest, which can be beneficial for people looking for a stronger grind game. But between a soft Garnet, needing to discard, and needing to banish potential tools for Tempest Revival, it's not as appealing as the others to use as an option of its own. Next, let's talk spells. spells. As you're already aware, Speedroids have two exceptionally good archetype spell cards that allow for insane extension. Speed Recovery is a monster reborn for Speedroid cards, and yeah, that includes the high Speedroid cards. Not to mention, it lives up to its name by providing you likely access to the Terratop you summoned on the first turn, and of course, being a 5Ds era reference, the phrase once per turn is nowhere on this card. In some ways, this brings up the question if Monster Reborn is even worth running, and honestly, that's entirely up to the pilot. On the other side of this, you have Speedroid Wheel. This card usually flies under the radar of a lot of players because it doesn't sound that intimidating at first. After all, what are the actual chances that you roll something good? 2/3 of the time. If you can resolve this card and pull 2 cards from your deck, it's usually going to be a great turn. Even if you low roll though at a 1 or a 2, it still helps you get dice or marbles out of your deck. I've even seen lists with 2 dice just to keep Wheel alive, while also only giving the quote-unquote 1 bad roll. But I just don't think it's worth the added garnets. Next, I want to talk about the newest technology that finally graced our hands for a single format until Konami's done advertising the punk archetype, Emergency Teleport. This quick play spell card went from being a decent tech card to being one of the single greatest additions to this deck. The effect is simple. Special summon a level 3 or lower psychic from your deck onto the field, and it doesn't matter what happens during the end phase, it's not going to matter. There are currently 3 worthwhile targets, starting with Virtual World Hime Nyan Nyan. Nyan Nyan is a level 3 wind psychic that, after being sent to the graveyard, can act as a secondary extension, special summoning itself as a tuner off of any level 3 summons to your side of the board. It locks you into level 3 and rank 3 or higher cards, preventing any further link summoning for the turn, but once it leaves the field, it's banished. Once banished, you can target one of your banished cards and shuffle it right back into the deck. The sheer number of applications this card offers makes it one of the best targets for Emergency Teleport. Right next to it though, we have Pilica, Descendant of Gusto, another level 3 wind psychic that when summoned, special summons a wind tuner from the graveyard with its effects negated, and yeah, if you're not already windlocked at this point, you're windlocked for the rest of the turn. These are the 2 cards you're almost always going to summon off E-Telly, and they're both great in different ways. It doesn't hurt to run one of each because E-Telly isn't even once per turn. Since it's a quick play, you can surprise game your opponent with an attack or board up to 2300 damage with a card turbo boosted Nyan Nyan. Finally, as a side option, we also have access to Ghost Ogre Snow Rabbit, being a light level 3 psychic tuner. Now, I know I just got done talking about being windlocked for the last few minutes, but this card does deserve to be talked about because it's currently an exceptionally good hand trap for the current format. It also functions as a tuner target for Emergency Teleport. Just remember, when summoning this card, you can't activate Cork Shooter during the same turn. Still, given its flexibility as a tuner hand trap, it's still more than worth a consideration. Next, I briefly want to mention Instant Fusion and Ready Fusion. I'm sure there's probably some world where people are summoning Invoked Raijin or whatever level 6 or lower vanilla wind fusions they want. The only problem is that these cards are a bit unimpressive when put next to Emergency Teleport, and we're left with little to no room to work with in an already tight extra deck. Finally, the great debate. Which search cards give the best options? I'm preferable to WYNN the Wind Channeler, as it allows for a discarding of possible garnets like Nyan Nyan, while also remaining flexible to search for wind monsters with 1500 defense or less. This allows for searching niche cards like Droll Lock and Pilica, but it's 100 points from greatness in that we can't have a searchable Godarla. Next, there's Speedroid Scratch, which requires the discard of a Speedroid card, which isn't too difficult, but it does limit you to only searching Speedroid monsters. But as a spell card, you're less afraid of the ever-present monster negates that your opponent is likely to shotgun at a win. Depending on how pure your build is though, you could have more targets with Scratch over WYNN. Lastly, we have Small World, and look, I'm just gonna say it, if you have Small World, I would run Small World. You can basically bridge to any card in your deck, as most things will link through Wind, Machine, and the level 3. The only problem that kind of exists with this is that you could potentially banish important cards that you might need later to resolve things like Wheel. Thankfully, Nyan Nyan can return cards even if they're banished face down, further mitigating the drawbacks of using this card. Finally, the moment we've all been waiting for though, trap card extenders, beginning with Starlight Road and how it can easily get out Stardust Dragon.
Thank you Gatsby, but I don't think they want to hear about Starlight Road today. Now, as promised, the last part of this video before we go on to combos and how to actually play the deck. Side deck is always heavily format dependent, so if the format currently has a lot of cards that banish themselves to search $80–90 cards, like the Brave Engine, run Artifact Lance. For our protection, we run 3 Solemn Judgments, because we lack Spell and Trap negation. Cards like Gozen Match are funny, to lock our opponent out of any other element, and because it doesn't really apply to us since all our cards are naturally wind. Besides Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, so that's a thing to watch out for. Cards like Droll Lockbird and Red Reboot are generally good. Red Reboot has trap negation, even though it has to be carefully used since it halves your life points, and Drawn Lockbird to be searchable off of WYNN and negate our opponent any chances to add more cards to their hand. For the last 3 spots, it's still heavily meta dependent, but I personally like to run Dark Ruler no more if we run into some boards that are pretty annoying to beat over. So you have reached the end of the video. This is where I again pester you for a sub and a like, or instead of a sub, a giant thank you button. As I thank you for watching all the way to the end, leave a comment down below if this helped you in any way, or if you have any other ideas for side deck cards or extra deck monsters I haven't mentioned yet. Next week, I hope, if I don't get caught up in anything, we will have the combo video out with the general how to play Speedroids, which will be the last part of this series until probably in a couple months I renew it if Konami decides to print any new support. And I again thank the Average Gatsby for hopping in and helping with the extenders. I wouldn't have been in time to finish this video without his help. So yeah, thank you again. Here you can check out his channel in the description below. Let me hear down below what other kinds of videos you want to see from me, since making videos takes time, but I like to take the time out of my day to make you guys some content. Again, until then, see ya!